This is the, I can get the formal name of the group, isn't it? This is the meeting of the Berlin Housing Trust for what is today, Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. Do we have the same disclaimer we have for select boards? You know, that,
Oh, yeah,
that this meeting might be recorded or is being recorded, and so your name and your voice and your telephone number might be added to the record. Our agenda for tonight is short and simple. It is, this is our first meeting, therefore organize and structure and set meeting cadence and pieces like that. We are still short, one person who's been appointed, not here. Mm-hmm. Is there still an opening too?
Mm-hmm. So
there should be 5, right?
Right.
But we have quorum because we
Right,
have 3.
right.
So
Are we all members? Am I just
I think
Yeah.
there is a select board member,
right,
and
right.
that
So
is
there's
you.
four
so, yeah.
four members of 6 present.
5.
5.
Yeah, it's just 5 people.
It's 3 of, we've got 3 of 5.
You're not a member.
No?
No.
See, that's what's confusing me. See,
I asked him.
First meeting, we got to work these things out. Yes, we have 3 of 5.
I asked him to come because he has all the background information,
Yes.
and I thought we should, as a group.
We should start just because that you sent all those emails, some of which I have scanned quickly and some I did a little
yeah,
bit.
some of them have quite a bit of information,
Right.
but I thought that's their problem, not mine. You know?
And so why don't Tim, why don't you lead up just sort of what the purpose and why this was formed?
So, with CPA passed, Community Preservation Act, so that meant that 10% of the revenue from that was dedicated to affordable housing, or community housing is what they call it. And so we've accumulated funds over the 3 years. We've accumulated money into that account. And we've had a housing partnership for a long time, but they don't have the capacity to expend that money. And so we explored with Central Mass Regional Planning the notion of having a district-wide or multi-community-wide housing trust. And we didn't gain any traction with that. And then we got an opportunity to join the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium, which we did, 3 years ago? 2.5? And we said, here's someone that can do this for us. And they said, well, all of the other towns in the group, which is 8, have housing trusts of their own. So it'd be sort of redundant. So grow up, you know. And so we said, okay, we'll put an article on the warrant and we'll move forward on creating this trust, because then the trust would have the opportunity to step in cases where we might lose affordable units and expend funds. And I mean, you can borrow. There's a lot of opportunity that you've got. So we took that to town meeting. It passed, a year ago. So, and then we took our time a little bit in terms of appointing people, but then it seemed like time to explore, so we put feelers out to see who was interested, and some people enlisted, so that was great. And I think there are other people that would be willing to serve, if the Eloise opportunity falls through, if the Ethics Committee says the town clerk ought not to be in a position where they're utilizing funds this way. I mean, that's the question that I think she asked. So now with the trust formed, you can begin to look at opportunities to utilize the CPA money that's there for housing. There's mitigation money that's come in over the years for community housing, affordable housing, and that's a sizable war chest that you've got at your fingertips when you need it. So that was sort of why we got involved. We just said, no one else will help us, and we ought to do it internally. And now with the money available, it's always easier to find people that are willing to serve on a committee if there's actually some capacity to get something done. So, it's true with the Historical Commission now. It's true with REC, I think. I mean, all these committees are going to have more interest because they have the capacity to utilize some of the CPA money to work on tasks that would help the town. So that's how we got to where we are now, in my mind, anyway.
And the 4 projects, there's going to be feedback from like the planning commission has a sense of where there's some housing issues. The housing partnership does, the Assabet housing, and keeping track of those 40 Bs that are out there and making sure we don't lose.
Right. So what we've got $8,000 in the budget to participate with the Assabet Regional Housing Collaborative Consortium. And they engaged Metro West Development Collaborative, which is out of Newton. And they've got a small staff, but what they do is help facilitate projects.
Mm-hmm.
And they also keep track of their subsidized housing inventory, the SHI. So we're in a wonderful position in that we're over 10%. So as a result, we can be picky and choosy about the types of affordable units that we create now, which is a wonderful position to be in, because that's not true for a lot of towns. And we were always in a situation where 40Bs that weren't friendly 40Bs would show up and be popped into spots in town that probably weren't the most appropriate. So now, if a 40B were to come, the Housing Trust could work with that entity and suggest that the parcel they're looking at doesn't make any sense, and you could negate it. But if it did make sense, you could really go along with it and run with it. It'd be fun. And then we've got tax title land that over the years, some of which we've put into conservation, but some we've held. And so there's some lots here and there that we haven't been able to do anything with, but we earmarked for potential housing sometime down the road. And in talking to the North Central Habitat for Humanity folks, they're really interested in working with Berlin. I've talked to Carolyn, is her name. I can't remember her last name, but she's the executive director, and she's just itching to come into Berlin. And usually I think they look for a piece of land that they can be given that's maybe been taken in tax title that's appropriate for a housing unit, and then some money out of CPA perhaps, or out of the mitigation money that you've collected over the years that would help speed the process along a little bit. It might only be $40,000 or $50,000, but it would gain some traction and get them up and running. So they're keenly interested. The consortium, with the help of the collaborative, the Metro West Collaborative, they'll maintain and watch over the subsidized housing inventory. So you don't have that maintenance work to do. There's an entity that's paid out of this $7,000, and they bill us quarterly for what they do. So we just paid a bill for them, which I think was close to $1,000 for the quarter. So sometimes they do more for us, sometimes they do less. In Hudson, they're overseeing I think it's the redo of the old police department on Packard or Cox or whatever.
Cox Street, yep.
So they're helping Hudson's Housing Trust go through the steps that are necessary in order to manage the oversight on the creation of those affordable units, so they are done appropriately and then can count on the SHI. So there's that group that's there to help. There's North Central Habitat that's here to help. And then CPA has voted, and the planning board as well, to participate with this housing coordinator with Central Mass. So Central Mass is going to hire a housing coordinator starting on July 1st. I met with the group that's participating yesterday, and they want to probably serve 5 towns. It would probably be Shrewsbury, Upton, Auburn, Mendon, Grafton, I think, and us. So I guess there may be 5 or 6. And each town would get 4 hours of service. The individual could work out of the office in Central Mass, if they needed to be here certain times, they could be here. They can participate in your meetings, and they're at your disposal. I mean, the nice thing is other towns are going to use that person to help manage the subsidized housing inventory, which to me is a waste of talent. I mean, that's a bookkeeping process.
Mm-hmm.
And where the collaborative is so skilled at it, you know, they understand exactly when they need to send out notices, and they've got the list of who's on the target list and all that stuff. So trying to train somebody to deal with that just for a handful of towns, to me, isn't a practical use of their time. So this would be somebody that you could utilize to say, well, talk to us about ways in which to utilize CPA money. You know, can we talk about first-time home buyer assistance, or ways in which we can, move along affordable units that might be falling off the SHI because they can't find an individual that qualifies, because we've lost a few of those over the years. So we don't want that to happen again, and with the money that you've got in this talent from that coordinator, I think we ought not to lose any more units probably. So, you know, there's all those opportunities. There's those really three opportunities in my mind: the collaborative, the consortium, the trust. I mean, the habitat, and then this coordinator. So there's actually 4 different opportunities that weren't in place 2 years ago. So,
Right, we're going to be an embarrassment of riches to start. Like,
Yeah.
Well-
there's going to. I think we'll end up with like too many not opportunities. Where to start chipping away at when there's all kinds of options. You're right. There is both money and some staffing and, you know, plots of land and.
what I'm not familiar with is the need to generate some rules and regulations, some procedures and all. I think what I've witnessed in other towns seems to be they pass that document that says we're creating this trust, and
Which we
it
did.
talks about what you can technically do. But then I think there's another set of documents, and again, I'm not, I didn't look into this too deeply, but it seemed as though some towns went back to town meeting and said, here's some other standards that we think we ought to live by. And I would think that would be something that the coordinator could pay
Right.
attention to. They might say, no, you're fine, what you've got is adequate.
Right, but they might reach out to other towns and at least get us some of
Yep.
the templates those
and
towns have been going
I
by.
want to think I actually, it's been a while, but I want to think I saw that online. I saw
Mhm.
actual examples of
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
So, there's the nice thing is in the consortium, we've got these 8 towns, which is Bolton, Lancaster, Boxborough, Hudson, Littleton, Berlin, Stowe, and then Devon's is in there too.
Hi.
Hi.
Kate?
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Apologies.
It's fine.
I thought 6:30, so
Ah.
this.
So we were just talking about some of the opportunities that you've got to work with, but so those 8 towns all have trusts, and when they meet, this is the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium that we're part of. So the 8 towns meet sometimes every 5 or 6 weeks, and usually it's just a roundtable discussion about what's happening. Well, I mean, like, all those towns have got huge, big housing projects going on now. Not all of them are up to 10% like we are. So some are struggling to get to 10, like Bolton and Harvard. Some are doing some really innovative stuff, like Devon's has got some great, like cottage housing that, you know, the planning board's been sort of wondering about. And then Stowe's doing a mixed-use project on a golf course over there where they're going to have cottage housing, some condos, some apartments, and I think some single-family homes as well. So it's like hundreds of units, but it's a real comprehensive approach and stuff. So I think the opportunity to tap into some of their experience, and again, this coordinator could jump around and do some research for you, come back. So I think, again, there's plenty of opportunity, like you're saying.
Right, and this coordinator has been hired at this point, or?
July 1st.
July 1st, okay.
Yeah. So, right now, Kristen, I think, is Kristen signing? I think Kristen's signing the document. I'm going to talk to her on Friday. So what we did is we said we'll take, the first year is free because it's covered by a grant. The second and third year, so fiscal 25 and 26, are 15, 16,000 a year, something like that. 10 will come out of CPA, and CPA is voted in principle to back that in the second and third year. And then the planning board agreed to take money out of the housing partnership funds to utilize in the second and third year to balance out the total amount that we need. So those funds that have come in through mitigation with Highland Commons and way back with the Brook Lane project have been sitting in the hands of the housing partnership, and we've used it for the membership payment for the Assabet Consortium, and on occasion we've used it for upgrading the housing production plan. So each town has to do a housing production plan. You have to upgrade it every 5 years. Yeah, it's still 5. And we're in the process of finishing that now. So I think I sent you a draft of the plan as it stands, particularly what we're working on right now, which is sort of the goals and objectives that we sort of forecast for the next 5 years. So if we'll meet with Emily from Central Mass Regional Planning the next time the planning board meets, which is, I think she's coming in on the 11th. So if you want to Zoom, well, that's going to be in person. I mean, if you're around and you want to come to that, or if you've got ideas after you've looked at the goals, because they deal with housing, so your participation in that process is important. And we won't finalize that draft probably till later in the summer, so there's opportunity for you to participate as that goes along, which would be a good idea, because some of those objectives, it may drive some of the activities that you pursue. Some of them it has less to do with affordable housing, but housing in general. But I think the trust ought to be looking at the broad swath of housing, small A and big A both, so.
I assume Kate? So I'm Scott.
Scott.
Yep.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
And don't worry, I thought this meeting was 7 o'clock until I actually looked at it on my calendar. I said 6 on my calendar. I wonder what it is. I went online and
You have some early birds on here.
I adjusted my my evening so that it worked. Thus dinner is in a jar next to me.
I was trying to be early.
Yeah. Well,
6:20 for
Yeah,
6:30.
did good.
Yeah.
I think
nice
it'd
to meet
be
you.
fun to hear where you all come from. I mean, in terms of what you're doing now, and because I don't know if you're aware of the skill sets that you all bring to the table,
Not really.
which was one of the things that excited me.
Why don't you go
about
first,
this
then?
group.
I'm from Berlin.
Mhm.
I work for myself. I manage real estate rentals. I paint them, and now I paint for other people. I've managed real estate up and down the East Coast over time, but basically back here with family and concentrating on Berlin these days.
Nice.
Yeah, I was on the select board a couple years ago, and now I am the chief of staff of Senator Robin Kennedy.
I am on the select board right now.
Yeah.
I have my whole life I've worked in nonprofits, currently in the mental health arena, although we have a large program with housing because there's a connection between those two areas. I actually, in part of my career, I've worked for a housing developer that only developed housing for homeless and low-income adults, and did healthcare for actually homeless adults as well. And so I've done my little stints in housing. I think of myself, though, as much of a numbers and finance sort of person as anything else, although my job title is I'm the head of IT for LA Community Human Services and on the select board here in town.
And you're familiar with co-housing?
I am familiar with co-housing as both a concept. I lived in co-housing for 12 years, although since I've just moved across the street from it, I'm still going to be quite active and part of that same community, even though I'm officially outside their boundaries. I think I've already referred to it as Mosaic Extension. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm Lauren, and I guess my experience sort of with housing is I work currently for a company that does affordable housing certifications. So I work on like the paperwork side, helping people apply for affordable housing and, qualify. So a lot of, documentation and paperwork, helping people through the process. So I kind of know the end of the user living in the homes for affordable housing, more so 40B projects. That's what we kind of focus on. Some home ownership as well. But yeah, so I'm interested in learning more and what, affordable housing we can do, other options besides, 40B and that kind of realm. So it'd be cool what we can come up with, and yeah, I'm excited.
No, when I looked at the talent that you were bringing to the table, I thought this is a great mix because it's these experiences that all touch on housing, but from different parts of it. And I thought that's a great way for a trust to get off the ground. And then with this coordinator to help you, I thought, boy, sky's the limit. So I was excited. I thought this is great.
Yeah, I'm excited that there's a neat balance happening here.
yeah, it's going to be good. And there's officially still one more opening. So if somebody watching on the recording or connections, they can. I think they have to reach out to
Select board.
the select board
Yeah.
for appointments.
And I think Eloise would be happy to be an advisory role if if the ethics committee says, it's probably better for you not to join in. The thing that Eloise brings is that breadth of experience in the history, so she understands how different things came to pass, like Northbrook 2. I mean, she really escorted that through the whole process, and so in Northbrook 1 and 2 are integral to our SHI, and she's she watched what happened with Riverbridge with the apartments, and she's been familiar with over 55s, which this new one has a affordable component, and she's been participating with 3, 4, 5 40Bs that we've had over the years. So she's a wealth of knowledge that way, but I think whether she's on the committee or not, she'd be more than eager to help share, I think.
Yeah, and I did invite her. I was hoping she would come tonight.
Yeah, she's got office hours at 7, so.
Do we have? I was going to say, do we have next steps? What do we need to do imminently? What would you say that our first steps would need to be? Obviously, we need to wait for the coordinator.
Right, but I mean, you ought to move forward in organizing like you've got on your agenda. So you need to have a chair
and a clerk
and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I was also thinking that up until July, we could take some of these documents that we should be sort of going on, even as a group, going over them. The Master Housing Plan, the Planning Commission is currently working under. There might be some housing trust documents between the group of us. We could find a couple to just bring and figure out what might be some added features, so that maybe we have a little bit underneath us by the time a housing coordinator can be brought in and give us sort of more staffing. I mean, July is a blink away anyway.
Right.
So
That's the good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're gonna. So that group from the commission. The 5 towns, they've asked that someone be a point person, and so I had said I'd do that. And I can continue to do that if you want, or if somebody else wants to be the point person, that's fine too. What they're going to ask us to do is participate in the review of who the candidates are for the position, and then I supply some input as to who gets selected for the spot. And then I think they'll probably ask someone from from each of the towns to participate in I don't know how often they'll meet, whether it'll be every couple months or more often, just to review the status of the position and how things are going and ways in which it could be improved, perhaps. So just to supply feedback. Right. So, I can meet with them for another month or so, and then you guys can decide, that you're ready to jump in on that. There's 2 other studies that are being done by the commission that we're going to participate in. So District Local Technical Assistance, DLTA money, comes from the state to the commission. All the RPAs, the regional planning agencies, get funds on an annual basis. So we get about $270,000 or so. And usually the staff and then communities come to the Physical Development Committee, which I'm on, with proposals for how to utilize those funds. And there are 2 projects that Berlin signed on to participate in. One is to review the impact of short-term rental, particularly like, when you, what do we call it? Someone goes online and...
Airbnb?
Yeah, Airbnb. Yeah. Glad you're here.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
reviewing that and the impact it has on permanent rental, and we said it may not impact us as directly as some other towns, but it's certainly something to be aware of, because in some communities you're beginning to see zoning that's beginning to be evaluated and approved that deals directly with how to regulate Airbnbs. And that's something that I think, again, feedback from a group like you guys would really make a lot of sense. And then the other study, for a long time the planning board's been trying to figure out how to fill that niche of small A affordable, because we're at the SHI, the subsidized housing inventory now is like 17%. It'll probably drop to 12.5, 13 with the new census data, because the number of housing units that we're going to have calculated is going to increase, but the total number of affordable units will remain the same at 201 or something like that. We'll add some more with the South Street Capes, or whatever they call it now, and then we'll add some with the Highland Ridge. So that'll bump us up closer to 210. But of course those add housing units as well. But if we're at 12.5, 13%, that puts us in reasonably good shape. But the planning board's been concerned for a long time that housing that fits in the middle, the standard house that gets built in Berlin for 600 plus is happening automatically. So we said, how do we create housing that can fit into that other spot? And that's one of the things in the update to the housing production plan that we're trying to include. And so the planning commission is going to have half a dozen towns participate in some discussions about how you might work on cottage housing or workforce housing and the production of that. And in our case, because we have that parcel of land that Riverbridge owns, that where River Run was going to be built, that affordable housing project, where Boundless is now. That's a portion of that land is available to us, and water is on the site already, so infrastructure costs are reduced to some degree, and Riverbridge would certainly be willing to share or have us buy in to its septic. So the infrastructure can be handled. The land costs are significantly less than what you normally find, and the opportunity to use that as an experimental site for some workforce housing is something that the planning board's thinking about. So we're going to participate in this process with Central Mass. And I think what they'll do is they'll probably bring in some developers and then try to write some model bylaw language that towns might use. And in our case, we'd argue for an overlay because that's the traditional pattern that we've often used. Other towns may want a slightly different approach. They want to embed it in their zoning. But I think in our case, we'd argue that the overlay is still the best choice, because then you go to town meeting and everybody in town gets a chance, if they want to participate, to have a voice in whether that overlay district is created on that particular parcel. So, and we may utilize that some other places in town too. But we've looked at the Devon's site where they've got the cottage housing, and then there's a couple in West Concord, Riverwalk and Mill Run or whatever, and there's one in Carlisle, and there's some really innovative developers that are floating around that I think would be, I think if we had land, water, septic, and a bylaw,
Mm-hmm.
that then we could go and put it on RFP for to entice some people to come in and join us. I think we could get some real good proposals. And I think, having you guys help with that process would really be great too.
So many good options out there.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I guess maybe the next meeting would be sort of defining
Yeah.
direction a little better to start, and where we want to start with things.
Mm-hmm.
How often would you like to meet? Is this a once a month thing? Is this a more at the start and then we do less? What are thoughts on? Do you have?
I mean, maybe I don't know if it makes sense to do once a month, and then as things ramp up, if we need to add more,
Yeah.
rather
Okay.
than but then we could also meet more and remove. It's totally
Okay.
either way, but
Well,
I'd probably
let's start with once a month.
Yeah.
Wednesdays work for everybody? Is that good? Okay.
Yeah. I can make this time work.
Okay, so Wednesday is at 6, and then I don't know which Wednesday this is, but we'll pick the
Yeah.
whatever Wednesday of the month this
Right.
is. Yeah.
Wednesdays tend to be big meeting nights in town, but I'd like FinCom that we conflict with is about to not meet as often,
Yeah.
starting almost immediately, so
Okay.
I'm sure there'll be a room.
Yeah, and we can, if you all want to do virtual or back and forth or whatever you
Yeah.
want to do, that's fine too. What is the preference for virtual versus in person? I mean, I'm 5 minutes from here, so I don't care one way or the other.
Yes.
I tend to prefer in person, but that's
Okay.
just because I have not
Yeah.
had a lot of virtual experience.
Okay.
Sure.
I almost want to
Either way.
start in person so we get a sense of each other, and then
Okay.
I think when we have the culture down, I think it's easy then to go virtual, because
Mhm.
the body language and other stuff that we can then imply better over virtual.
Yeah, you can say,
Absolutely.
he doesn't believe that. What does he think
Alright.
he's doing?
As I think about roles too, the Assabet housing collaboration, is there something that we should be, who from Berlin attends?
So
that?
I do now.
Right.
But, don't twist my arm,
Right.
because I'll bend,
Right.
I'm happy to keep doing it for a little while. When you get to the point
Yeah.
where you're ready to jump in, I'm not gonna be around for the next meeting, which I think is April 18th or something like
Mhm.
that, but,
Okay.
um,
Does somebody here want to duck into the next one since?
they tend to do them midday, like 1
Okay.
o'clock.
Oh dear, okay.
Yeah, so what happens is that everybody that's on that committee or that body
Right.
are either town planners or,
Employees. of
yeah,
towns.
they're all,
Yeah.
everybody seems to be an employee of the town they represent.
Okay.
And that's how they ended up in that role. So,
Well,
you might
Right.
very well say to the coordinator, when other people can't make it,
Right.
you could have that person
We have a
sit in
couple
on
hours
those
a week
meetings.
of that, so even if we're meeting monthly, that person will be able to do other things besides just prep for these meetings
Yeah.
and digest and.
Yeah, because you'll have them 4 hours a week,
Right.
and some of the time that might be attending your meeting,
Right.
but other times you might very well say to them, can you attend this
Yeah.
on our behalf? And then a lot of outreach and
Yeah. How long are the meetings?
usually about an hour, sometimes
Okay.
even less.
Because
It depends.
I might be able to do some
Right.
of that in the vise of lunch hour.
Yeah,
Right.
it tends to be 1 o'clock, and like this last one was over in half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they just go around, and usually they'll update, and then they might, from the discussion, the folks from the collaborative often are able to say, okay, I'll send you a link to such and such.
Right.
Like this last, I can't remember what it was, but I thought, I need to open this because it was really appealing. And I'll send that around to you guys, so you'll get an idea of what they're doing. But there's always something sparks, and they'll say, oh, well, we'll send you this, and it's helpful. And then they bring us up to date on what's going on with Mass Housing Partnership, because sometimes they're holding sessions. I think they announced 2 different meeting dates in June where they're going to have their annual. One is virtual, one day is in person. But I can send you that information too. Because I talked to the folks at Mass Housing Partnership 2 weeks ago. Because we were trying to deal with the 72 Carter piece, and we were trying to put the pieces together. So we were dealing with Habitat and Mass Housing, and some other housing trust people from Falmouth and different places. And we couldn't make that project work at this time, so we decided to just buy the land and let the house be sold as a market rate unit. So that'll be on the warrant for town meeting. But in the future, when an opportunity like that comes up, that's an opportunity for the trust to sort of step in and evaluate whether the expense would be worthwhile. The difficulty we had in this one was there wasn't I think the Habitat might have participated in the assistance through holding our hand, but the collaborative said for just one unit it was difficult for them to expend the type of staff time it would have taken given what they could accomplish with that same amount of staff time with some of the other towns they work with. So they said ideally it wasn't a project for them. Which was unfortunate, but we learned a little from that.
Where I was going sort of mentally when asking that is that if there is sort of a liaison to the ASABET group, a liaison to the housing coordinator group, a chair position and a clerk position that sort of all need to be taken on, and with 4 of us to sort of figure out the best way to divide those up, with each of us just grabbing one of those to start, thinking that we might come July, when we have a better sense of what's going on, what a better sense of what those places are going, and a better sense of what we can get out of it, we might adjust some of those at that point. But to get us at least through the next couple of months. And I don't know if there's, if any of those call to any one of you folks. We're all going to be pretty easygoing. We're just put things into a hat.
Yeah, I have no interest in being clerk.
Right.
Sorry?
I have no interest in being clerk. I hate taking notes and doing minutes, so somebody else needs to do that.
All right.
It shouldn't be hard though, because it is taped now, so I've seen Eloise go look at some of her notes for some of the committees that she's on. She is wonderful at keeping things brief and informative so whoever wants to do that, she's a model.
I always take notes, so it's like nature for me to do it. So I can do that.
And then do you have something that is calling to you then?
I just don't want to do minutes.
Okay.
Do you think you can do the consortium stuff?
I think I probably could.
It's usually 1 o'clock,
Okay.
Yeah.
and it's
And
every
what day of the
6
week?
weeks.
Every 6 weeks.
Usually it's been Tuesdays.
That's about the hardest day of the week, but
I mean, that's something I can do too.
so you can do during the day?
I
Okay.
can more easily do during the day, yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna
If-
let you do that, because if
Okay.
it was any other day than Tuesday, but I'm.
Yeah, no, if you're trying to
Crazy
fit that in,
Tuesday.
I can work around that.
I'll
more
send you
easily.
it's Tuesday the 18th, and I'll send you the link, and I can tell them that there'll be a new face.
And you said 1 p.m.?
Yeah, I think that's what they said.
Great.
And then if you're fine being chair, I'll take care of the housing collaborative and hiring. I do a bunch of hiring, and it's sort of part of what I end up doing even during my day stuff. My days are, my job's officially 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but it is flexible enough that if they needed me during a day, I could probably make something happen too.
Okay.
And so if you want to connect me up with the collaborative, I will help them and be at those meetings. And
So that's, so.
the housing coordinator, sorry.
Yeah, with
Good.
Central Mass.
With Central Mass, yeah.
Okay.
Geez, I'm not gonna know what to do with myself.
Gosh, it's springtime, don't you have plenty to?
I do.
Yeah.
I just embedded a tractor in mud that I've never in all my years got stuck.
Yeah.
And it is buried. I cannot move it. I'm out there shoveling, so I have to go back and shovel some more. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, on my
Welcome
land,
to
I have no
farming.
idea like what is wet now that is normally wet and what is wet now that like has not been wet
Right.
in a decade or so. Because
Well,
that
that's-
whole back 10 acres there's water every 10 or 15 feet
Yeah.
somewhere, so.
No, this piece, I've driven through this all my life, and I just
Yep.
buried a tractor. I thought, something strange.
And so, for a minute's sake, is it sort of by a consensus that we have a chair, a clerk, a collaborative, what is it, Mass Housing, what's the Central Mass?
Central Mass Regional Housing
Central Mass
Commission.
and the Asset
Well,
Housing
it's Central
Collaborative.
Mass Regional Planning Commission, and they're gonna have a housing coordinator, and so they're gonna have a group, an entity that
Yep.
deals with that. So you're gonna do that.
I'll do that.
You're gonna do the collaborative, the
Yep.
consortium with Assabet Regional Housing.
And we'll come up with something new for the fifth person when we get them on the thing for them to do.
Yeah, and this is actually the 5th Wednesday, so we'll do the 4th Wednesday.
Yeah, okay, 4th Wednesday, yep.
So the 26th next
Yep.
month would be the meeting at 6 p.m.
And I'm thinking that for that meeting, just both, we get to report back those two things we're doing. But I think the planning board's housing master plan,
Yeah, the production
the
plan.
production plan.
So if you
that
did some research on that.
Right.
I can send that again
You sent
to
us, we
everybody.
can go over it and talk about it and just, in some respects, for me, it's gonna be how much of it do I actually understand what it's saying? But I think our 4 different unique perspectives on that could make it a better document for the town.
Okay.
And so Emily's gonna meet with us on the 11th. And there's a hearing at 8, so I would imagine her time would be, and the hearing's gonna be quick, because it's just one zone article for the warrant. So she might be joining us at like 8:15 or something. But I'll send you the goals,
Yep,
Okay.
so you've got those.
yep.
So for the agenda next time, it's report on will any of those meetings have happened yet? Probably not.
By the end of May?
Or April.
End of,
Yeah, the
April.
Oh,
18th
we're
is
in
gonna
March still.
happen.
We're not in
Yeah,
April yet.
we're just barely still in March.
So the consortium is gonna meet on the 18th.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
have an update on the
And-
consortium.
And I'll check with the commission to see if they're planning, they might very well, they wanted to post the job next week.
right.
So they may very well start to interact with
Yeah.
the reps from the different towns.
Right, there'll at least probably be an update, they've at least
Bef-
posted it.
Before
so.
the end of April, so I
Okay.
can let you
Yeah.
know about that.
And then we'll discuss the production plan,
Yep.
and
So
see
I
what
think that's a
research.
great- Yep,
And then, we can also look at whether anybody can find the further documents that we
Right.
may potentially need.
yep,
And that's a pretty good agenda for us.
right.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe a fifth member by then. Have to poke some people in my neighborhood too. 'Cause I thought there might have been someone up there who had some interest.
There's some
so.
people up there still that
Yeah.
I think might be interested in, and,
Yeah, we just need to plop the application.
Yep, yeah.
you know, some people begin to watch some of these meetings,
Yeah.
they may say, oh, my heavens, what an opportunity. and they have funding.
Right. And staffing, so at a certain point, even taking notes might not be as intensive as it might be to start.
Yeah.
Good, so I think we have that might be enough for tonight to start.
Yep.
Alrighty.
And we all have, again, you've sent a whole bunch of documents that I've also not finished reading yet, so I think we'll delve into those too. Well, then thanks. I think that is a meeting. We need a motion to adjourn, don't we?
Sure. Motion to adjourn.
There. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.